Welcome to the dark side of therapy. This is episode 50. This is incredible to me that we've now kicked out 50 of these things. I never thought we would last that long, and so I'm really proud to be at 50. Justin, my co-host, good to see you. And I feel like I never do a great introduction. So, Justin, let me see if I get this right. You are the owner of the Midwest Trauma Center. Did I get that correct?
Greater Minnesota Trauma Center.
Greater Minnesota, but you're in the Midwest, obviously.
Yes, of course.
And I am the owner of Pathways to You out here in Minot, North Dakota, out where the buses don't run, uh, out where we have an Air Force base and not much else. But Justin and I are unique in that we both have a private practice. We both have very strong beliefs about mental health, what's wrong with mental health, what's wrong with a lot of things. But today we're going to take a slight detour and we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to both our hearts. And I got to tell you, my favorite teacher of all time was a guy named Jim Ockery, who taught English my junior and senior year. And my senior year, we had a class called Film as English. So we actually watched movies and then did write ups and commented. It was actually pretty powerful stuff. I'm sure other people are like, well, they're just messing around watching movies. But no, we were learning things. We were learning how to recognize character development and the highs and the lows. But you ever get that great teacher, Justin, that just gets you and understands you as a person? Do you ever have an experience like that?
Not really, to be honest with you. To be honest with you, I don't feel
Just
like
yeah.
I know what you're saying. I've had
Uh,
lots of friends and colleagues who are like, yeah, that teacher really saved me or really kept me going. Or I just never connected with any of my instructors. I just have always, I think part of it is just I've always seen the education system as just so out of touch with reality. Um,
Mhm.
and there are great teachers. I mean, shout out to teachers.
There are.
But they're part of this system that I'm not particularly fond of, and so I don't know. I've never really, and part of it is probably I've never let myself connect to any particular instructor. But no, the short answer to that is no. I don't. I've never felt that. Sorry, Eric.
You know, when you open a parachute and you think you're going to be fine, and then all of a sudden it gets a hole and it just goes down. That was sort of the equivalent of my high energy opening to your no. I've never had that experience. So let me just jump back and say I've had a lot of crappy teachers too. Uh, one who actually, this is a true story in second grade. If you didn't get mathematics problems right, she would kiss you. I'm not making this up. I mean, you try that crap today, and you're going to spend a month in county jail.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a good experience. But let's kind of dive into, tell me, in your opinion, what is wrong with the educational system in the biggest possible way? What's the number one thing that hampers the educational system today?
I think it's. I think the biggest thing is we try to just standardize everybody. There was what was it part of one of the Bush administrations when they passed sort of the No Child Left Behind Act. Okay,
Yep.
I get. I mean, I think the intent maybe uh, was good, but I think hundreds of thousands of kids since then have been left behind um, for various reasons. Minnesota does what the MCAs or whatever, and
Remember,
Texas
yeah,
does
yeah.
does the STAR testing. I don't know if they got rid of that or not, but every state sort of has their own testing, and I think some states have gotten rid of it. They're standardized tests, right? And then you just sort of look at what the education system is sort of rooted in, and that's behaviorism. And you know how I feel about
Right.
behaviorism. Um,
I
you know,
do.
EBD classes, right? Emotionally behavioral disturbed. I mean, everything is behavioral this, behavioral that, and so I think that lots of kids have been left behind.
Yeah, you and I are going to agree on this because isn't it an interesting contrast that in mental health it's all about formulating these individual plans and all about let's work to the strengths of in education. I mean, we've had the same system for like 150 years, haven't we? It's a sit down, listen, and to really make it individualized, that's where your alternative schools have to come in. And I've been around a couple that I thought were really good, but for the most part, it's a one size fits all system. And if you don't fit in that model, you're kind of screwed. So I agree with you.
Yeah, you are screwed if you don't fit within that system. And then, there's so many kids and so many, public schools are so short staffed that what happens to those kids that don't fit in, right? We just sort of move on without them.
Right. And I don't know what the studies say, but I would bet you a steak dinner that the amount of depression and anxiety that flows through some of these kids is pretty profound because number one, they don't feel like they fit in. That's a huge thing. That's isolation right there. And then they
Yep.
end up feeling stupid. And this whole idea of don't compare yourself, well, that's all kids do, Justin, because they're taught to do it, from the time they could start formulating thought. You base yourself against your peers, but that also goes against what the psychology says. You can't compare yourself to people. So yeah, it's a very bad system. And why is nobody fixing it, or why is nobody that needs to fix it fixing it?
I mean, I think you get I think you get different organizations and groups that try to make differences, but I think that this is all, there's state law, there's sort of federal things, and then there's state laws around education, and when it comes to law and statute, there's not much you can do about that, right? You gotta go to your Congress, and we all know how amazing Congress is at the state and federal
Pretty
levels, and
amazing.
so yeah, so I think it's hard to really make any impactful, meaningful changes. I think there's a lot of grassroots work that different organizations have done, and I think even some schools, I don't want to be like, oh, schools are terrible, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are some good people inside the school systems that have done some good work, but I think like anything, like any system, their hands are tied.
Yeah. It just seems to me though, this is so fun. Most of the problems we talk about are pretty high end problems that have just multiple layers. But this is as simple as, what if we learned everybody's learning style? What if we learned how each student learns? Now, the blowback we're going to get, and this, is, well, that's going to cost too much money because if you get all these different specialized teachers, but that's the solution, I think. Let's teach to the strengths of the kids.
Well, and we do it sort of backwards, right? I mean, once you get to college, and even then, that's a whole thing too. But I mean, then you
Yeah.
can go and pick your majors, and you can do what you like, and right. But why do we wait until they're 18 years old to do that? Why are we not doing that very young? Um, you know, I did come a little bit prepared for today.
Okay.
And do you know who the sort of the founder of the American education system is?
It wasn't Abraham Lincoln, was it?
No.
Okay, then I have no idea.
So the person that's known as sort of the father of American education, his name is Horace Mann. He was born in 1796. Um,
Wow.
so I'm really bad at history, but what the United States was founded in 1742
Gee.
or
Um, um, 1776, I believe.
okay, so 20 years later, this
Yeah.
man was this guy was born, right? Horace Mann died in 1859. Um, but he believed in uh, sort of this standardized like education for everyone, right? And really pushed for this. Um, and so sort of universal education is the word I was looking for, right?
Okay.
He
Right.
advocated for common schools, institutions that would be available to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay for tuition. So that sounds great, right?
It,
Um,
it does. Right.
yeah, but he, you know, continued on and continued on, and then get wrapped in that, and so there's this theory, and I'm not going to get too much into conspiracy theories, but
This is awesome. Come on.
Horace Mann was said to be part of this group that was like everybody sort of catching on board, like, yeah, okay, schools, yeah, yep, we got to educate our people, we got to compete with Europe. And then the question was sort of like, but what do we teach them? What like if we're going to do this 12-year thing, what do we teach them? And the conversation was sort of like, especially from the people in power, was sort of like, well, let's teach them about, let's teach them nothing about everything, right? So when I get kids in here, teenagers in here, that are like, I mean, how many times have you heard, Eric, teenagers tell you, I, oh, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're all good.
Oh, oh, okay. Sorry. Um, how many times have you had students in here that have said, "Why do I need to know this stuff? How is this going to
Yeah.
help me later on in
Oh,
life?" Right? I
absolutely.
mean,
So,
over
yep,
and over and
yep.
over again. And so, it, one thing that I was taught during my master's practicum was um, that to pay attention. That people give clues about themselves all the time. The world gives clues about itself all the time. Well, that's a theme. That's a recurring theme, right? These students saying this over and over and over again. And when you really think about it, like I don't know, when are you ever going to use the Pythagorean theorem, right? Um, when am I
Yeah.
ever? Yeah, like it's great to learn history also, but like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what do I care about? You know, um, Whatever, right? I mean, so the theory goes they were told teach the kids nothing about everything. So sort of this, and the idea behind it was, and again, this is sort of a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but the idea behind it was we don't want them to be critical thinkers. We don't want them to be independent thinkers. We want standardized. We want everybody learning the same curriculum. We don't, because if we get independent thinkers, if we get free thinkers, they will question the system. They will question the powers that be. There will not be sort of this sheep, sort of, so to speak, right?
Right.
That's sort of the conspiracy theory behind it. But if you
Yeah.
think about the education system, I mean, I think there's a lot of validity in that. I mean, kids come out graduating, and yeah,
Yeah.
like what do they really know about life? They don't teach you about how to balance a checkbook or how to file taxes or any of that stuff.
Yeah. I don't even think it's a conspiracy. I I think it's pretty true. And most people don't even know that it's happening to them because they're not thinking about that stuff. But wouldn't it be interesting if we did teach some of that stuff? Here's something I've advocated for years: emotional emotional intelligence as a student.
Mm,
Let's learn how to deal with your emotions. Let's learn how to deal with regulation. Because again, we don't teach that first, and I think there's an order
right.
of operations there. But if you're right, and this is all true, why would they? Because that would be knowledge, and knowledge is power. If you learn how
Yep.
to regulate yourself and your emotions, you have a leg up on everybody else.
Yep.
Uh, See, I'm not like that. I like pissing people off. I like being on the fringe, so to speak. So, yeah, I'll say it. My formal education was not very useful to me. I loved certain teachers, but what do I remember 25, 30 years later? I don't know, 5%?
Right. Well, I mean, even like think about your grad program, right? I mean, I think about my grad
Mhm.
program, in my
Yep,
master's program, and I had some really awesome teachers. Yeah, my instructors in the real world, I would refer clients to them, but the knowledge they had, that didn't come from school. That came from the real world. That came from practicing. That came from experiencing.
right,
Um,
right.
I can't say that I really learned anything uh, in my master's program that was sort of this novel thing, right? I mean, sure, I learned some things, but in terms of like changing my life, making me the clinician I am today, no.
Right.
It was very sort of just systematic, and now I'm in my PhD program. I spent a year in my PsyD program, sort of your traditional brick and mortar school. Did I learn anything?
Right.
The only thing that I learned was I don't. I'm an outcast, and and I question the system too much, and instructors don't like that. I also
No,
learned
they don't.
in my interpersonal class. I also learned that everything that instructor was teaching and all the research he was pointing out in that book um, is quite the opposite of how I run my practice and how I work with clients. That's what I learned, So even in grad school, even I mean, the college system to me is a joke. I think if I had spent 2 years in my master's program at, if I could have spent all 2 years with the psychologist that I did my 10-month practicum with, I would have learned more
Right,
in two
right.
years than I did doing all those classes.
Um, boy, you might get us canceled on this wonderful fall day, but I'll back you up with this point too. A lot of professors in the field of social work, um, probably psychology, I say probably, they're not out there practicing, okay, in my experience. So they're really teaching a lot of theory, here's what it could be like. I had an intern many years ago, Justin, and she had to bring her field advisor in because we had to go through all the evaluation. And this guy is just sitting here talking about models of intervention. I'm like, dude, have you ever been out there and sat and talked to a person? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't want to be an asshole here, but holy crap, this kid is here to learn the frontline mental health system, and you're not going to get that by learning about all your Ericksonian theories. They have a place. They have a place. But if that's all you know, I mean, I could just tell, Justin, this guy didn't know nothing because
Hmm.
I don't think he ever worked with a live human being.
Yeah.
And that's a real weakness in our grad system. Now, do you know in your programs how many of your professors were actively doing mental health work as they were professing? Because I could be wrong about some of this.
To be honest with you, in my master's program, I'm not quite sure. Um, I will say, for example, the person that was teaching me developmental psych, that person, and nothing against, I mean, just preface this, nothing against people with doctors of education, but that
Uh-huh.
was her degree. It wasn't even in psych. She had a doctorate of education, and she was teaching developmental psych. Okay, at a master's level, probably not the end of the world, but I know she wasn't
Right.
practicing. My
Okay.
instructors in my PsyD program, yeah, I think the vast majority of them had a practice. And now that I'm switched programs and I'm doing my PhD in clinical psych, um, most of the professors have met so far have practiced in some regard. But you can
That's great.
tell the things that they bring in that are that the things that they bring into the classroom are always helpful. But when we
Right.
follow the curriculum, when we do the syllabus, that stuff's busy work. It's stuff
Oh
that
yeah.
I'm just like, I just got to get this damn discussion done by 11:59 p.m. tonight because it counts as points. That doesn't help
Right.
me. That
No,
just
not
gives
at
me
all.
anxiety.
Not at all. And none of it's as exciting as having a conversation about sitting with somebody with bipolar disorder or BPD. What's that like? What's that like, Professor? Tell us what it's like.
Hmm.
To me, that's where the learning occurs. And then, God forbid, check this out, that your professor slash therapist allows you to observe a session, then you really learn some stuff.
Right. Right.
Here's what I found, just to really make this conversation even more tantalizing. A lot of teacher therapist people will not let interns or supervisees sit in on their sessions. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Well, um, I mean, I think part of it is that judgment, right? Or worried that I'm not doing it the right way, or like as a supervisor, I have an image to protect, and if they see I'm doing something shitty, right, or
Uh-huh.
I'm not that great of a therapist or clinician, right? Um,
Right.
that's my perspective.
That's my perspective too. And I'm like, but if they don't see that, how do they ever? Now I'm getting fired up. How do they ever know that it's okay to make a mistake? Who's going to be the person that does model it?
Yeah,
Because you're not that perfect. I'm sorry. You screw up all the time. You just have no
yeah.
witnesses to it. That's the reality. So, Justin, I've had I don't know how many supervisees sitting on my sessions, and let me preface this with always consent, always completely
Sure.
informed about what's happening, and I have never had an experience go bad that I know of. Never had a board report against me because the clients felt safe because I really feel like I set it up that way. But I think if you're not giving your students or supervisees uh, some insight into that, you're not a very good supervisor slash professor slash whatever. That's just my opinion. Because
Right.
again, where are they going to learn that it's okay to screw up? And guess
Right.
what? If you do screw up, you can talk about it later. Hey, what did I do wrong? What did I? But people don't like to give up their power, Justin. In academia, that's really true. They don't
Right.
like that.
It is the okay. So I will not name the educational institution that I taught at last year,
Okay, appreciate
but
that.
I did get because it was a great opportunity. It really was a great
Yeah,
opportunity for me to teach, um,
sure.
and it came through because I was part of a PsyD program, and they last minute needed an instructor for an undergrad developmental psych. And they were like, any PsyD students? I was like, yeah, pick me. So I contacted the person. I got to do it. I couldn't go because I'm over in um, where I am at, and the institution is about 2.5 hour drive. And
Okay.
I was teaching it um, like either Mondays and Wednesdays or Tuesday and Thursday mornings for like an hour and a half. And I would have loved to be in person. Trust me, I would have loved to be there in person, but there's no way I was going to
Absolutely.
drive 2.5 hours. Um, so so I'm teaching developmental psych to these undergrads, right? And like at least six of them dropped out after the first day or two, um, partly
Wow.
because I was really real, and I was like, look, I got thrown into this last minute. I don't even have my book because the school is still figuring their crap out, and because everybody, they were just so conditioned. They were like, "Where's the syllabus? Where's the this? And what's the da, 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 da," and very
Right.
conditioned. And I'm like, y'all need to chill. And here's the thing, my style as a person and my style, I've never really technically officially taught a college course. I said I've taught in different capacities, but not like this. I said, but my teaching style is like, we'll figure it out. And you're going to be okay. And everybody's going to
Right.
pass this class because it really isn't about passing to me. It's about, are you understanding the content? Are you getting something from it? Are you being challenged? Well, that didn't sit well with some of them because they freaked out. And then, of course, a day or two later, I'm having a conversation with the dean and the chair for psych department, and they're like, yeah,
Wow.
so maybe next time don't tell them you don't have the book and don't tell them these things. Like some of these are processes like happening behind the scenes, and the students freak out. You don't need to tell them, and I'm like, oh, so you don't like me throwing you under the bus? I'm just supposed to no. So, anyways, we moved past that. They were even thinking about canceling the class because we only ended up having like 9 people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what
Besides,
was great
okay.
what was great about this was the majority of these students were um, nursing student or like med students. They're doing what they call this
Okay.
3+2 PA, right? So they do 3 years of their undergrad, and then they have a partnership with one of the big hospitals. They can go get their physician's assistant in 2 years, right? So 5 years total. So I'm teaching developmental psych to a bunch of med students, which which was like, I'm gonna challenge you, um, because the medical world and the mental health world don't always, right, they butt heads.
They
So we're
sure do.
doing this, and the one thing that got me was like, I remember being an undergrad student. I remember not giving a damn about anything other than just give me the thing, let me do the thing so I can get out of this class, give me my grade. And that was how it was like for most of them in this class,
Mhm.
not all of them, but that was what it was like. Was it was just like, okay, here I am, give me the assignment, and and I was getting really annoyed with them, but I had to take a step back, and when I thought about it, yeah, I mean, they're adults and they get the choice and they can be engaged if they want, and also that's how they've been conditioned. I mean,
That's
you
a great,
think of
great word. Yeah.
think about K through 12. That's how you're conditioned at
Yeah.
some point.
Right.
Even most undergrad and graduate classes, that's how you're conditioned. So you don't college isn't everything it could be, in part because we condition them to just do the stuff, get the grade, move on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I was thinking as you were talking, academic panic. That's the word. Academic panic. They come in, oh, there's no objectives here, there's no learning goals. Oh my, what are we gonna know? We're gonna talk about real world shit, where you might actually walk away with something of value.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny as you're saying all this is I can't think of a field that is more non-negotiable with goals and objectives than mental health therapy, social services, because not one person I've supervised ever sat down and said, you know what? Thank God for that objective. And whatever class I took, I'm so glad I got that objective down. It doesn't freaking matter. Uh, but it kind of breaks my heart to know that they came in with that expectation that
Yeah.
it's going to be one way. I just want to get through it because it really removes the absorption of the experience if you have a good professor. So I appreciate that you shared that. And I'm glad that you were above it and you said, no, we're going to do things a little differently on my watch because I want you to learn something. I want you to be good at this.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be skilled in objectives and meeting your goals.
Because those are the people, right? And in particular, this class, those are the people that are going to be our doctors, our surgeons,
Right.
our
Right.
prescribers, right? And that's scary because then people become checklists, right? I did. I used to give a mental health talk for engaged couples back when I was doing it for the church. They would do sort of their like pre-Cana retreat day thing, and
Yeah.
I was the one that got to give the mental health talk. One of my maybe like my second year, I was talking, and I knew there was a husband and wife that were doctors that were presenting, but I didn't realize they were still there. And so as I'm talking, I'm saying, like, yeah, and doctors are trained, problem fix it, problem fix it, problem fix it, and saying sort of like they're not necessarily trained to sort of take a step back, zoom the lens out, look at the 10,000 foot, take the 10,000 foot view, um,
Right.
and sort of going on that way, and also saying like, doctors are sort of the first professionals that people go to when they're struggling with their mental health, right? Because it's normal to go to the doctor.
It's
And
very true.
then of course I see some heads just and some arms
Yeah.
crossing. And I'm like, son of a, they're in the audience. Um,
Yeah.
and he approached me afterwards. One of the doctor did, and he's, Justin, I take a very holistic approach to my. And I'm like, man, if you were offended by that, I think that says a little bit more about you. And if the shoe fits, you clearly laced that some and wore it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that makes me worried. That was one of my thoughts when those kids dropped out. I'm like, man, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We get
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
rigid, and now you're going to go be medical professionals. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a sad commentary on what they're going to bring to their jobs because we already know the medical system's not very good either. I mean, man, we can just comment on everything that's not very good, right? But it really does come down to me, Justin, as I'm listening to you talk today, the word absorption keeps coming to my brain. How do we absorb people into what the work really is? And how do we get them to care about it? Because some doctors don't give a shit. It's just the way it is. They don't care. Relationship's not important. Connection's not important. It might be to us. I think it is, but it's not important to everybody. It's as you say, get them in, treat them, and then get them out.
Yeah,
Um, I think it's a shame that we teach that way. I understand the need is so big that maybe the system has to be that way. I don't think so. I think we sort of collapse to whatever the easiest approach is, and the easiest approach is big numbers and then get them out. Um, I've watched therapists do it. I've watched nurse practitioners do it. I've watched physicians assistants do it. So what we're talking about here, I don't think is a complete indictment of the education system, but it certainly isn't giving it a lot of credit because it does kind of start there. That's where we get a lot of our modeling of how to be. um, but I learned the most, Justin, I can say this without argument, sitting with clients in my grad program before I became a graduate student,
Yep.
Dealing with people was the single greatest teacher I ever had.
Well, and one would argue, because I've heard this argument before from
Yeah, please.
my really rigid peers. um,
Yes, of
but
course. I have those
uh,
too.
I'm hearing one in particular very um, say, but Justin, college can also, and these grad programs and the courses that are requirements, um, and the B, the 3.0 threshold, can sort of be seen as sort of ways to weed out people that
Mm,
that don't belong in the field, or that maybe this isn't a good fit. But the threshold, I mean, come on, Eric, the things we have to do to, like, these classes, even some of these ones in my PhD program, and this is not an indictment against the program, because I think the program has come a
I
long way.
understand.
But the
I
things that
understand.
are being asked, like, you almost have to try to fail, right? Like you have to try to fail. So it's like, I get that argument that we need to have some of the foundational components, but that that doesn't negate all the other problems, and that's just one
Yeah.
tiny piece to this. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I get we need the foundational, but that, to me, is a real small, um, almost irrelevant point.
And again, it's driven from an academic person. And here's the thing, Justin: no active therapist is going to say shit like that. It's just the way it is because they know better. You and I sit with a lot of clients. I see about six, seven a day. I don't know what you see. Not once am I sitting there thinking, okay, where's that foundation I'm sitting on here? How can I apply that now? No, I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking ahead. I'm constantly thinking about what's coming next, anticipating. I don't think I've thought about foundation once in 26 years of mental health. That doesn't say a lot about me, but I don't think anybody thinks that way. I don't
You
think.
mean the Carl Rogers video they made you watch in your
Oh
class didn't
yes.
help you? You don't reference that on a regular basis?
Do you remember what was the other one? The Stanley Milgram experiment. Remember that one?
Um, Remind me.
So this is, and I did learn something from this. So let me be a hypocrite here. This was the one where they brought people into the room and they administered a shock to a person on the other side, and you'd hear this, oh, and they kept going up the levels until they basically killed the person because all Milgram had to say is, well, you have to keep going. And it was this whole idea to show that regular people are basically like, the Nazis. And if you're told to do something, you'll
Yes.
do it. And every one of them like gave a lethal blow.
and and and, and that makes me think of, I forget who did it. I remember watching him all the time in my psych class in high school. Um,
Mm.
I can even see it, but I can see the guy, but I can't think of what his name was. But
Tell me, I'll know him.
he also did this experiment. It was the prison experiment, where it was all mock,
Hold
and
on,
they
Philip Zimbardo.
Dr. Philip Zimbardo. Yes, I remember
Oh,
watching him in high
Zimbardo.
school. And
Yeah,
they for those of you that don't know, he did the experiment where there were fake. I mean, everybody was not real prisoners or real um, uh,
yeah.
police
It was
officers
students.
or guards, right? They were all students, and some of them were the guards, prison guards, and some of them were the prisoners. And I mean, essentially, in short, uh, what was learned was that even when first of all, the prison guards, even though they were students and they were acting, and this is supposed to be an experiment, they took on the
Right,
persona of a prison guard and power,
right,
and
right,
the prisoner is less than, and I get to treat them however. And we also learned that other prison guards who were like, "Ooh, I don't like this," they fell in line. So just like what you were talking about, right? We fall in line and
right.
we do that. And so how does this have anything to do with what we're talking about with the education system? Well, that's what happens. You fall in line. You fall in
Right.
line, and and so that's why earlier you asked me, well, how do we fix it? Well, it's hard because everybody just falls in line.
And I'm so glad you brought up that. I got to hear Zimbardo speak a couple of years ago at a conference, and he said it was his girlfriend that actually encouraged him to stop doing the experiment. She's like, "Dude, you can't go forward with this. This is messing people up." But the crazy thing is that it doesn't take meanness or violence to get people to do things. It's just simply being told you have to. So, yeah, to bring it full circle, if you're a 6-year-old kid in kindergarten being told, well, you have to do it this way, you have even less power to control that. But even if you're a full fledged adult, well, you have to do it. You're right. They will do it, they won't question it. And I'm really glad about this episode today because there needs to be people that do question things. Now, regardless of your thoughts on EMDR, I don't even want to get into that today, but let's just say this, okay? It at least came from somebody that thought outside the freaking box, okay?
Sure,
Didn't
sure.
just say we need to do trauma treatment this way. Same with cognitive behavioral therapy. Somebody said, let's do it this way. So it's always the people that create these new things that nobody else is thinking of. And so it really does make our whole educational system look like, okay, yeah, you're not going to be an outlier. So be a lemming, fall into place. And I can't imagine a less exciting life, Justin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating, and I think about some of the experiences when I was at my PsyD program at the traditional brick and mortar school. Very small PsyD program. Everybody knew everybody. Our cohort was tight. Well, I wouldn't say tight, but I mean, it became very clicky very fast. But even
Sure,
the
sure.
instructors, I mean, there were students crying and being berated, and the school administration will deny that, but because they questioned a policy, or they were like, no, this is really wrong. And I mean, it just became there was the power control, the power dynamics, right? But
Right, right, right.
if we can for a second, Eric, I want to back up all the way
Please
to
back up. Yeah.
developmental stages. um, when children first enter the school system, we are trained as a society, we have it in our minds that as soon as that when kids are born, they got to learn how to walk and crawl and talk. And right after that, they got to learn how to write their names and say their ABCs and their one, two, threes and their colors, so on and so forth, right? And by 3 or 4 years old, if you are not using words, if you are not speaking in full sentences, you must have some kind of delay. You might be
Right,
autistic. You might,
right.
et cetera, fill in the blanks, right? And so we
Yeah.
place these high demands on these children. And who said that's how it was supposed to be? Who said that by 4 years old, you are supposed to be talking in full sentences? By 5 years old, you should be writing your name and spelling it. By six, so on and so forth. Um, and so
Mhm.
before we even get into middle school, high school, college, children need to be able to play. Schools need to be less about these things are important. Don't get me wrong. Writing your names, all that kind of stuff. We want literate people, right? We don't want to send illiterate people out into the world. But
Right.
research, and I won't bore you with that. I have a list I can cite for all of our viewers. Drop a comment. I'll be more than happy to share the links to these research articles. But the
Yeah, yeah.
research is very clear on this. Children learn best by playing, by being curious, and by exploring their world, which is exactly what you and I are talking about. We are good clinicians because we explored the world of mental health. And yes, Batman, yes, we explored, um, but we don't allow our kids to do that. There's this game called Ungame. It's a bunch of questions. Um,
You've heard of it, never played it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily play it. It's really just there's two decks. One is a little bit deeper than the other, and it's sort of just a way like when you don't know what to do with your client, or when you just need some icebreakers, right? You go back and forth and you ask these questions. And one of the
Right,
questions
right.
that is in the deck that I always give them, one of the questions is that they always ask me is, Justin, if you were principal of a school, what would you do differently? And my question has always been the same. I mean, I used to give different answers, but now my question is always the same. And I tell them, I would give recess to everybody at least twice a day from K through 12 because at some point recess stops and I don't understand why. As if 16, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 year olds don't need to go outside and run around and throw the ball and regulate. We have
Right.
to explore more. We have to stop with the 8 hour, 8 period school system. That's not helping our kids.
I was waiting all weekend to bring this up. I went to Highland Elementary School down in Reedsport, Oregon, right on the coast. Lovely, lovely place to grow up. But we had recess, dude, 3 times a day. We had one in the morning for like 15, 20 minutes. Plus, we had gym, I think, every day. Then at
Sure.
lunch, you had a full half hour, and you wanted to get outside so you could play tag with your buddies or football. I mean, we ran our asses off. And then at like 2:15, we had another recess. And I mean, it was beautiful. Now, if you take a poll now to how much recess is in schools these days, very little. Gym is even an exception in so many schools. And
Yeah.
Justin, I can't believe in this day of diagnosis of ADHD and autism and neurodivergence and all this, why is nobody talking about taking exercise out of the school? Nobody is having this discussion, at least not publicly.
Yeah. I mean, we had our trauma conference a couple weeks ago, and I was
Yeah,
really excited because one of the charter schools from Mankato came, and the principal, or I'm not exactly sure what her title is, but sort of the director there. It's a small school, 20 staff, but she had messaged me like a month before, and she's like, "We really want to come to this. We really want to be a trauma informed school. We get a lot of students from the public schools, and it's just not working for them, and we want to be able to help them. What do we do?" So I said, "This is a start. Come to this trauma conference. We will continue the conversations afterwards." But something that I've heard about the charter school, about this new country school, the new country school, they take kids by lottery now because there's such a wait list. But I asked one of my kids, I said, he's probably like 10. I said, "So what'd you do last Friday for school?" "Oh, we went to the beach." And I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah, we went to Duck Lake." And I said, "Oh, what'd you do?" And she's like, "Oh, well, we had some things we were supposed to find." Basically, she was explaining like it was a learning opportunity, something they had been talking about,
right.
whether it was science or English or history or whatever. They had some like little eggs they were supposed to find, right?
That's
Uh,
awesome.
but they were able to go to the beach. They were able to be out in the nice weather. They were able to explore the sensory stuff, right? The sand. And this is a girl. This is a girl who she has switched schools twice now. She has been bullied. She has been the bully. She's diagnosed. She's
Mm.
been to prairie care. She's done all these behavioral things. She's. I wouldn't say that she's loving this school, but I haven't heard any issues.
Wow.
Um, and
Wow.
what is what
Okay.
is the what is the key factor there, Eric?
Yeah.
It's the
Well,
play. It's the
yeah,
exploring.
right. It's the movement.
Yeah,
You know, I know we're gonna run out of time here, but the presentation that I do, Justin, I think you know this. I talk about play with my adults. In fact, it's about age 14 where it really starts to taper off and people stop playing. But here's the thing that people I think don't understand. Just because play goes away doesn't mean we have any less need to do it. I'll say it again. Just because it goes away doesn't mean we have any less need to do it. And the example I use in my presentation, Justin, is Halloween. People get dressed up on Halloween. Yeah, I know they want to drink
yeah,
and party, but it's also fun to be somebody else.
yes,
And I said on Halloween, you can do that October 31st, walk into a bar, it's fine. But you're dressed up like a pirate or an alien on November 1st, you go into a liquor store, you might wind up, in jail that night for being some kind of freakazoid. But I think it's within us to play. I just think, again, we need to be told almost in a paradoxical way now that it's okay to play as an adult.
yeah,
Just because, again, it stopped doesn't mean, you know how many action figures I have? And here's one of my favorites. This is Bob Ross right here. Okay. Now that's play and fun. I can't look at that and not have fun. So
yeah.
I
And,
drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
and just to add to all that, imagine imagine how much better relationships between school administration, teachers, PCAs, paras, whatever. Imagine how much better the relationships with the students would be if not only if we let the children play, but if we engaged in that play with them, right? If
Absolutely.
if you had parents or teachers out there throwing a football with the seventh graders, with the fourth graders, with the ninth graders, with the seniors, right? Instead of seeing that biology teacher as a person who just gave me two detentions because we can't take our phones out, and this biology teacher,
Right, right, right,
right?
right, right, right.
But Miss So and So was out there, and she was totally shooting hoops with us. Like, I still don't like her, but actually that was kind of cool, right?
I saw something similar. It was either TikTok or a YouTube short where these police officers pull up to this neighborhood and the kids are thinking they're all going to get arrested. They're all playing basketball. It's like,
Yeah,
man, I loved that because
yeah,
look at what it taught those kids. I know different context, but same principle. Show these kids a side of you that is outside of you just being a disciplinarian or somebody that assigns grades. Yeah,
yeah.
I could not agree more with what you're saying.
My presentation at the conference in Minneapolis and then my trauma conference, one of the things that I talk about, I forget, I have it quoted in there, but I don't remember if it's Bessel van der Kolk or Bruce Perry, but just
Sure.
that the best healing agent for trauma or really anything is relationship and connection.
Mhm.
Relationship and connection. And so this is probably a whole nother episode. Um,
Probably
I have
is.
my thoughts about police officers and sort of my history with police officers, and, and I think there needs to be a whole reform with the way that policing is done in this country. But I do think that individual agencies, there are some that are making good steps. I mean, in the small town that I live in, 12,000 people, I don't like small towns. I really don't. I don't enjoy small town living. I mean, I'm getting a little bit used to it now that I've been here for so long, and being in this town, making this town my home, and being a part of that change, I'm enjoying a little bit more. But when I think of small town police, I think about your typical like, oh, the police chief got drunk, he got pulled over, we're just gonna give him a ride home, right? The mayor was intoxicated, we'll give him a pass. That's what I think of when I think of small town policing,
Right,
um,
right, right.
and that's a generalization, I know. But what I really appreciate about my small town and the police officers is that they are really trying with the community. I mean, in the summer, they do cone with a cop, right? Where they have police officers over
Mm,
at Dairy Queen, and everybody comes and they get you an ice cream cone for free, right? My kids,
it's
they
awesome.
love it. They just did what was it like splash with I don't even know, but the police officers were over at the pool. They jumped in, so
Yeah,
they're doing a lot of
I
these
love.
things, and what a great way to connect and to show a different side. Does it negate all of the things that police officers have done and still do? No. But it's a good step in the right direction. It's a good way to repair broken relationships.
Absolutely. And and it takes people out of the context that we freeze people into.
Yeah.
That's a police officer. No, it's a human being
Yeah.
um who thinks and feels and probably has a job more difficult than we could possibly imagine. But again,
Yes.
that could be a separate episode. I want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes, and it's either Plato or Aristotle. I'm sure you've heard it. They can't quite pin down who said it, but it goes, "You can learn more about a person in an hour of play than a year of conversation."
Yeah. That's why play therapy is so amazing.
I know. That's one of my that's the only regret I have about getting out of working with small children. But in my therapy sessions, don't think for a second. I don't throw balls to people and we play catch. Are you kidding me? And they're like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, you can do this in therapy?" Yeah, yeah, you can, and you probably should, and it's fun, and it's going to throw you off. In fact, one of my comments. I don't know if you've read all the comments on the Mark Bowden episode. That was one where I had the most. But somebody accused me of being like too jolly and happy, and they wouldn't want me as a therapist. And so now's my chance to fire back. I wouldn't want you as a client either, because if you can't come and laugh with me and have some fun through all this pain, we're not going
Yeah,
to be a good fit. So that's my
yeah.
response.
Okay. Um, I know we're getting towards the end here, but one thing I want to do really quick, if I can.
Yes,
Um,
sir. Yes.
there was a comment, and I love the comments. There was a comment from one of our viewers a while back. We were talking about neuropsych evals, and there was a comment that says something like, "Oh, Justin, I think you're getting neuropsychs and psychological evals confused." No, I'm not. There's neuropsychs. Neuropsychological evaluations are sort of psychological evals on steroids, um, and and neuropsychological evaluations, I think, are less biased than straight up psychological evaluations. I've explained it before. A neuropsychological evaluation, there's the neurocognitive part of it, right? What are our cognitive abilities, our reading comprehension, all those kinds of things. If language is hard for us, everything about life is going to be hard for us, right? So there's the neurocognitive part of it. Then there's the psychological part of it, our depression, our anxiety, our personality, the way we think about the world. And then how do they affect each other? Hence why it's called a neuropsychological evaluation, because they play on each other and with each other and sometimes against each other. So, so no, I'm not getting them confused. But a lot of the times, but thank you for pointing it out. But a lot of the times we think like, oh, this person is, psychotic. I mean, I was just telling you about some. I want to consult about something, and I was saying, yeah, we send people away to these facilities, right? Okay, you're probably going to send that person to this facility, and they're going to do a psychological evaluation, right? I think that's really when that term is used. I think a neuropsych, even for people that are sent to facilities, especially adults, should have a neuropsychological evaluation. But I think the problem becomes people also mix neuropsychs with the medical field, and medical neuropsychs can look very different than a trauma-informed neuropsychological evaluation. So I just wanted to address that.
So thank you. That was actually my friend Candace that put that comment. You would like her a lot. She's also a
Sure.
PhD. I think you both would get along well. Um, I think we should do an episode devoted to measurements and psych evals, neurological. Why not? And that's certainly way more your area than it is mine. But as usual, I have an opinion. But there is a dark side to some of this.
Yeah.
Um, the MMPI is the one I know the most about, but I can't administer one because I'm not a psychologist. But
Not true.
there are a lot of limits to these tools too. But that would be another great discussion to have. So if you're welcome to that, we should do it.
Yeah. So first of all, you can administer the MMPI. You do not have to be a psychologist. I administer the
Really,
Milan. I will cite. I'll give you. I'll text you the citation, and sort of the
please.
accrediting body that I have bookmarked, so that if there's ever an issue, it depends on how you use it, what
Okay.
you're using it for, but you can administer it at a master's level. We can talk more about that. I also think I have a special somebody who could be a potential special guest who does neuropsych evals from a trauma informed. She was my mentor. Um, it would be
Yes.
a very interesting conversation. While I agree with her on a lot of things, there are a lot of things I disagree with her on, and so maybe I'll reach out to her and see, because she has a
Let's
lot to
go.
say about neuropsychs.
And and like you and I talk about, it's not about coming on and agreeing with people or disagreeing. It's
Yeah.
about knowledge and different
Yep.
perspectives, and we're all going to have an opinion. Doesn't mean we're right. And I think if we don't talk about this stuff, it's a tragedy. So yeah, I want this format to be exactly for that kind of thing. So please invite her.
Yeah.
And I want to say, as usual, a great discussion. This one was really fun, though, because
Yeah.
education means a lot to me. And certainly I can say that at the same time while saying there's a lot of limits, and we've pointed a lot of those out. And my final shot to this will be put play back in school. If you change one thing,
Yes.
just one freaking thing, put play back in school at every level, K through 12,
100%.
college, grad school, your PhD program, your med school program. Just put play back in, make it mandatory, make it a class. You get your
Yeah.
figures out, whatever. But just do me that one favor, and
Yeah.
the change will be profound.
100%. Hey, I just gotta. I need to start rather than end the program like this. But Eric, are you a football
Yes,
fan?
I am.
Who's your favorite football team?
Well, are we talking pro or college?
Definitely pro. I'm not much of a college guy.
Okay, well, it's and this is sort of I've acclimated to the Vikings, so I'll look at the eye, and
Sure.
I know sad loss yesterday.
All I've got to say, I don't know if you watched the Dallas Cowboys game last night against the New York Giants.
I did not.
I'm a diehard Cowboys fan, so all I have to say is, how about them Cowboys, Eric? How about them Cowboys?
Um,
40-0 shutout, biggest shutout ever.
Um, I was actually getting back from a road trip last night, so I went to bed fairly early, but I'll have to check out my fantasy football stats to see if I even won that game. I forgot who I picked, but thank you. Um, Justin, again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's always a good time. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Like, comment, subscribe. And yeah, I have a couple of special guests in mind too. So I think we're going to have some really interesting stuff going into the new year. So I'm very excited. Again, thank you, my friend. Thank you for our listening audience. We'll see you next time.